And welcome the internet. How can it strengthen democracy? That's what we're going to take a close look at right now. And this being a session on the internet, we will of course urge all of you to write in, tweet to us, comment in every possible way that you can. The hashtag, of course, is hashtag NDTV25, so you can tweet on that or do whatever else. And of course, second screen. So open the NDTV app, which I'm sure all of you have by now. Tap on second screen, post your questions, vote questions up and down. We'll ask whatever it is that you actually want us to ask. And the panel that we have, well, I have to say, I've rarely seen such a illustrious panel to discuss the internet and where it's going to go. I'm going to start with Omar Abdullah, Chief Minister, Jammu and Kashmir, somebody who uses the internet to connect with his electorate and with a lot more besides. Swapan Das Gupta, senior journalist, political commentator, also uses Twitter and other forums to actually engage a lot. Rajan Anandan, the head of Google India, is going to really lay down the roadmap for what exactly is going to happen on the internet, because if Google's not doing it, it's probably not happening, right, Rajan? It's great to have Professor Ashutosh Varshney, Saul Goldman Professor of International Studies at the Brown University. Sohail Seth, whose opinions are loud and well known, whether it's on the internet or off the internet. Sohail, so we'll get some of those from you as we go along. Nana Lasit Bhai, President FICCI, country head HSBC, and Shekhar Gupta, of Indian Express. It's great to have all of you with us. Why don't I just quickly start off by laying some of the possible themes on which the internet can actually impact democracy, and I want to get each of you to expand on that list. From communicating and being able to talk directly to the electorate, that's one. From being able to deliver more services to people at a wider level, that's a second. And I'm sure there are other areas also where the internet can have an impact, including perhaps raising funds now for parties like the Aam Aadmi Party. Omar?
Well, I think in the first one, it's not so much us communicating with the people, it's the reverse. We've always communicated with people, but that communication has been largely one-sided. We have stood up on podiums and delivered speeches, but not really heard what the people had to say. Facebook, Twitter, Google Hangouts, stuff like that has actually reversed the flow of communication. We now listen through what people tweet, what they write on our Facebook walls, and we get a more direct sense of what the people are thinking than the otherwise filtered communication that we were exposed to earlier. So it's not like we're still communicating. I think it's as you could call the Aam Janta that is now sort of talking back to us.
Is the response sometimes skewed because it said that there are certain people who are dominating the internet, who are more vociferous than the others?
Well, there's no doubt that as of now, the internet seems to be, at least some of the social media space seems to be skewed in a particular direction. But that is changing. There is more and more voice of reason that is being heard. That's not to say that the voice of reason doesn't get drowned out when the noise starts. But if you can filter through the noise, there is a lot more reasonable comment that is available should you choose to look for it.
Okay. Swapan? A lot of reasonable feedback coming in also. I mean, sometimes it can be, I've heard you described as a raving lefty on occasions on the internet.
Yeah, well, I think it's more, something doesn't work on social media very considerably. But I take issue with Omar on one thing. I don't think necessarily it's the voice of reason which has got subsumed. What I think has happened is that because of the sheer newness of the media, and the ability of a lot of ordinary people who hitherto considered themselves voiceless, I think there is a great deal of insolence and anger which as a result of this has generated itself. And the mere fact that Omar will actually be possibly reading, and he's one of the very handful of politicians who actually not only does his own tweets, but who also probably reads them. Most of them outsource it to their secretaries or things. So that we must qualify the nature of the interaction is still rather imperfect. But I think it's really the newness of the media has allowed a lot of people to vent their anger. And that anger is not necessarily always couched in the most diplomatic of language, nor is it necessarily couched in the language of political correctness. And I think that would probably gall a lot of people, and hence the discomfiture of a lot of more established citizenry to this new media.
Right. Rajan, it was said till now that the internet, whenever you're talking about using the internet to connect with the masses, you're talking about a small section. It's the elite. It doesn't really affect people. Now that's starting to change, and I have to say Android and things like that are also having a massive impact. And as in the next year or two, the price of Android-enabled smartphones starts to drop down to, let's say, the $50 mark, you could perhaps have an explosion of connected people who can then continue to communicate in the ways that you were talking about.
Yeah, I think, firstly, I think it's important to keep in mind we already have 200 million Indians on the internet. India is adding 3 to 4 million internet users a month. So essentially by the election time, we will have almost 240 million Indians on the internet. Over 70% of registered voters in urban India are already on the internet, right? I think there's a lot of discussion today about Indians giving feedback, a lot of chatter, maybe negative chatter. Actually, that's not the point. I think what's happening, we've done a lot of research on this topic, and what we found is a large number of Indians are doing research about political parties, about politicians, about local issues, and they're becoming aware. A small and also trying to understand how much progress is being made. And by doing that research, they're becoming more informed, they're making decisions, and a very small majority of them are being vocal. So I think there's a lot of media attention, and I think political parties and organizations are being, are focusing on all the chatter, if I might call it. Actually, that's not the point. The point is hundreds of millions of Indians are making decisions based on information that they're getting. And I think the other thing that we found, we published this research a couple of months ago, actually, Vikram, together with you. A large number of them are undecided, and the reason they're undecided is because they have yet not got the kind of information, or they don't like what they're hearing, right? And I think this is no longer niche. It's not about 10, 20, 30, 40 million people on the internet, on social networks. It's about 200 million plus 3 to 4 million added every month who are now engaged deeply in understanding what these parties stand for, political parties stand for. So I think it's pretty profound.
And they may make their own decisions based on what they find on the...
I think we've already seen that, actually. Our view is, it's amazing. We've been past 6 to 8 weeks. It is amazing what is happening.
A slight disagreement with that. And here's, I think, one way to think about it. There are 200 million internet users in India. Only 25 million in rural India. So there is right away an urban-rural gap. India is still primarily rural, 68% demographically, and because rural India has tended to vote more than urban India in the last 20 years, which may change, electorally the rural weight is about 75%, not 68%, and perhaps higher. That part of India has not been penetrated by the internet. So this is an urban phenomenon, and actually urban middle class phenomenon. If the estimated size of Indian middle class is 300, 200 to 225 are using the internet at this point, so about 70% of that. So no, we are not reaching the urban poor, and we are not reaching the countryside yet through the internet. It may change in 5 years and 10 years.
Rajan, could I get a reaction from that? I mean, certainly if you were talking about the internet being based on PCs and laptops and desktops, that would almost certainly be the case in the foreseeable future. Is what he's saying changing now with Android phones?
Basically, yeah. So you're absolutely right. Today is an urban phenomenon. Actually, the numbers go like 50 million are outside of are from rural India. But what is happening? Firstly, you could debate whether 250 million connected Indians who are deeply connected can swing an election or not, right? I mean, I think that's for, I'm not in that business. That's for, I think, political parties to decide whether they cannot. Our view, but the data we are seeing is probably sure. What happened in Delhi, right? Lots of things happen in Delhi, but clearly this is an urban city that is highly connected. Not every place is like Delhi. The other thing that's happening, you have to keep in mind, of the 4 million Indians who are coming to the internet every month, 70% are not from metros. So every single day, they're having millions of Indians from outside of the metros that are connecting the internet. So that probably, you're absolutely right, may not make a difference by 2014. But if you fast forward another 4 years,
Yes.
you're talking about 5 to 600 million Indians connected onto the internet, and then we are clearly getting to that number of 750 million registered voters.
I do agree that by 2019, by the time we have next elections, this would be a very significant number.
So before I come to you, Shekhar, in your journeys, when you are looking at the writings in the world, as it were, do you see a major impact of the internet at this stage, or is it restricted to a few big cities?
Well, nobody can say that there isn't a major impact, or there won't be a major impact. But I think we are also going through a phase when we are presuming too much, as if internet is not a means to an end, but an end in itself. You know, even if I may steal the title of his book, I think all of us are also victims of the net delusion, a little bit. And if you studied a bit more, then you hear other terms like cyber utopianism. In 2010, the Nobel Committee did not raise an eyebrow when Wired magazine named internet as a nominee for Nobel Prize. And what inspired that? What inspired that was euphoria from Iran. Somehow, because Iranians were tweeting their anger against the regime was going to be upturned, and soon Iran was going to have a revolution. Nothing of the sort happened. It's taken 4 years for Iran to get some reform and change, and it's happened the old-fashioned democratic way, where coalitions have been built, where people have been persuaded, where arguments have been made in public. So sometimes, because we live in this echo chamber, I, in fact, in terms of the media, I worry a little bit about the impact it's having on us. It's making us much more conscious, for example, of our internet audiences, of our Twitter audiences. And I find more and more of us sometimes get worried about what response will I get on Twitter. In fact, I sometimes say, I'm probably not the best person to speak about this, because I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on Facebook, I'm betraying the fact that I'm not so digitally savvy, which is very bad, which is a black mark on your CV these days. But the fact is that any time my ego gets a little bloated with praise, all I have to do is to go to Twitter, and I figure out in 5 minutes what a low life I am, right? So it's useful, because, you know, as Omar said, a lot of people who could not get to you directly now get you directly, and they don't have to wait to make a phone call to you or send you an email. So it is an instrument of democracy. It's also an instrument of trouble. I'll give you one example which is very current. The Tehelka sexual assault case would not have reached where it has reached if there was no email. Email is possible because of internet. Yet, it's only because of internet that so many scoundrels in this country and in other countries also have dared to try and out the victim's identity. Right? Yeah. In no other medium would anybody dare to do it. But internet gives people the feeling that nobody will find out. And I think the problem with internet, and where it becomes a threat to democracy and free speech and free discussion, and in fact sometimes even becomes an instrument of fascism, is that it gives you anonymity, and anonymity brings out the worst in human beings. So you know, Facebook likes can be bought, as we now know. Twitter praise or Twitter attacks can also be organized, as we now know, right? So these are issues that we'll have to deal with, and I do not believe. I mean, look at the people who come and listen to Narendra Modi in Gandhi Maidan. They were not influenced by internet. Or think of all the resettlement colonies of Delhi, or the poor of Delhi, who've now voted in such large numbers for Aam Aadmi Party, deserting Congress Party. They were not influenced by internet. So politics will still be done the old-fashioned way. Internet will have influence, but people will know that internet is a partisan medium as of now.
Right. So here, the threats of anonymity, which can actually end up being a problem in democracy, and perhaps slightly related to this, a question which is coming in on second screen from Manish. Will government surveillance on the internet be a threat to democracy? So that's one of the questions from NDTV second screen, which is just coming.
Well, certainly not the Indian government, because you know, they're not so adept yet. But I want to the point that Shekhar touched upon. I genuinely believe that we're giving the internet too much of importance. It's a tool of information, perhaps empowerment, but it's certainly not going to strengthen your democracy in a manner of speaking. A, because it keeps a lot more people out than in. B, in its current form, it is being used, as Shekhar and some others mentioned, it's being used as a tool of hatred at times, as a tool of ridicule. You had a situation where the former Rajasthan Chief Minister, poor guy, actually bought followers from Turkey So he may have won an election in Istanbul, he certainly lost one in Jaipur. So, you have these oddities. So it's very interesting to sit here and say, oh, will the internet change our democracy? It won't. Electoral reforms will change our democracy. Do you think the louts who end up in parliament because of all the stuff that they do, transparent, honest people, do you think they really care about the internet? The fact that Rahul Gandhi is not on Twitter, is not on Facebook, and the only similarity he shares with Shekhar is a statement in itself. Not that he doesn't believe in social media, but he doesn't believe it's relevant in current day politics. So I think we're giving it far more importance than it deserves.
But Professor Maharshi, you were making a point just before we started the session that actually there can be another impact of the internet, that you can actually find ways of raising electoral funding, as we have seen recently, which gives people the chance to come out and contest and without having access to money bags.
Yeah, so we have a famous banker here we could ask, but here is the idea that in the American political space, a lot of funding today, electoral funding, is through the internet. You give your credit card number. There are not that many credit card users in India, but debit cards probably 300 million or so. So you give your debit card number, it goes to an electoral account, and if everyone pays, let's say, $10, and let's say 200 million people pay $10, that's a lot of money right away. And that's clean money with perfect records. So this is certainly an idea for the future. It can catch fire. As more and more people bank in India, as more and more people have debit cards in India, internet can be used for campaign finance.
And let me get you in on that point. And also the other related issue that many people say is that where the internet does help overall in the country and therefore in democracy is being able to keep a cleaner eye on things, e-governance, make things more transparent, put all land records on the internet and allow people to access it. Still a long way, I think, in this country before we really get there, but is that something you're starting to see happen?
I think it's a very important tool and one which really delivers our democratic rights and ones that we can't ignore. So if you look at the fact that today a courier company can actually give you the exact status of where its parcel is, we should be able to do the same thing for every file that applies to us, for every application, and the transparency it brings. You then begin to think about, well, rural India, and if there isn't a connect, what do you do? Well, what we're beginning to do in banks, for example, is use handheld devices. So the person at the other end may not have access, but the person who's delivering the service can provide that access. So if you look at it as a whole bunch of, banking correspondents, as they're called, and salespeople, if it is to do with products, are out there being able to connect people. And frankly, civil society, NGOs could do the same. For every individual that's made an application, if you had, whether it was the old sort of phone booth idea or handheld devices, you could actually provide this service to everyone in terms of how they connect back with the official system. Because if you think of how every farmer would waste so much time, statistics show he would pedal his way into some center for a day, camp there for 3 days, be sent back, come back again to get what is a very simple application sorted out. Imagine the service you could provide by taking it to him where he exists. And let alone all the communication and all those other advantages as well.
Okay, I'm about to turn to the audience to start getting some questions from there as well. But Umar, you want to just respond to that, seeing as you're the only person out here who's actually running something in the
I think the mistake we make is to automatically assume the internet just means Twitter and Facebook.
Absolutely.
For governance, there is so much. We talk about strengthening democracy. Communication is a vital part of democracy, no doubt about that. But so is governance. And the internet makes a huge difference to the quality of governance should you use it. In my state, we are currently experimenting with an Android-based project monitoring system for projects that are being taking place near the border areas. Now, this is where you will click a photograph of a project in progress. It will have a GPS stamp, a time and date stamp, so nobody can fudge records. And sitting in Srinagar, I can ask a particular officer in an area to take a photograph of the current status of the project, and I will know exactly what is happening in that area. Now, this empowers better decision making. It empowers the government to ensure accountability, and I think this makes a huge difference to the quality of governance and in turn to democracy. So let's not confuse the internet only with Facebook and Twitter. There is a whole lot of other aspects that can be used that will make a difference.
Okay, let me start looking around to see if I can get some questions and comments from here. Yes, can we get a mic there?
In countries like Korea, Japan, even China, internet is almost wholly in their local language. So does anybody on the panel feel bothered that internet in India is not really Indian in that sense? Because when will we have Indian language internet?
Well, actually, you'd be amazed how much local language content there is on the internet. There are a whole lot of people who use Facebook and Twitter in local languages, and also a lot of web content also in local languages as well. The fact is that unlike maybe the countries that you mentioned, we are extremely comfortable with the use of English, and therefore it's not the fact that a lot of the internet happens in English is not disempowering for us. We're actually quite comfortable using it.
The available stats show that 40% of internet users in India use the vernacular. So 40%.
Rajan, is that going to be the big next thrust?
Yeah, you know, so India, 200 million internet users, about 150 million Indians read, write and speak English, right? So essentially we are now beyond the threshold. And what's interesting now is the fastest growing websites in India are vernacular news sites. 85 to 90% of content watched on YouTube is non-English. And all the growth, I mean basically if you look at the next 400 to 500 million Indians who come online, they actually don't read, write and speak English. So they are going to vernacular sites. And when it comes to the, you know, we call it the Indic web, right, or the non-English web. The big challenge is really our access. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve, because keyboards, unlike in China, don't work as well, so we're trying to solve access and so on and so forth. But that's really, I mean, for us in the internet ecosystem, this is one of the big challenges we have to solve, to solve access, get a lot more content online, make it more valuable.
Well, of course, as you get more and more of the internet happening on video and on voice and things like that, then that starts to change, because video would be in the language. So another question that's coming in on second screen from Nikhil says, do we require censorship on politically sensitive videos on the internet? Could probably expand that to other sorts of videos which are not necessarily political sensitive, but which may also require censorship. Who wants to dive into this one?
Well, I will, because from time to time I've had to actually either shut down the use of the net or control access to particular pages, because unfortunately, as a lot of the panelists mentioned, there are nut jobs on social media who want nothing more than to inflame passions, and oftentimes using data that is grossly incorrect. I mean, you're taking photographs from different countries and projecting as if those events have taken place here, back home, therefore inflaming passions and creating problems. So while censorship I think is too strong a word, from time to time restrictions on access to some of these pages or places becomes a necessity, because otherwise governments are left with a law and order problem to deal with, and whether we like it or not, that can't be dealt with over the internet or through social media.
May I just intervene? I think the example which Omar gave is very clear-cut. I mean, that was a sort of black and white case where certain restrictions had to be imposed. But I think there is a larger issue involved. Who decides?
Yeah.
And I think that issue is left very unattended in a thing. We've had silly instances of people having FIRs filed against them because they may have criticized X or Y. Now the moment, and this has been the practice in the past, the moment you give certain discretionary and arbitrary powers to any of the police force or bureaucracy, there is an inevitable tendency to misuse them. And I think that applies to the intelligence agencies as well. And I think the great furor which has been happening in the West on the question of data snooping is partly linked to that. So I think this is an issue. While there might be certain clear-cut instances where, you certainly apply the guillotine there and then, I think we need to have a little more considered view, and I think the entire gamut of our experience has to be greater before we can take
I think the debate has to be reset. The debate has to be reset from censorship and restriction to application of laws. In a free society, nothing should be censored, not even the films, frankly, and nothing should be restricted. There should be no law saying you can say this and you cannot say this, because then, as Chopin said it will be prone to misuse because law and order in any case is a state subject, so every state police will interpret it differently. But the important thing is...
The point you made about anonymity is that now people think they can actually get away with stuff which should be libelous or slanderous or outright dangerous.
I think it's worse, and it's something that the media also sort of encourage. There is a feeling that laws that apply to you in normal media do not apply to you on internet. So, for example, laws of libel, laws of contempt of court, laws of privacy, although privacy laws in India are really non-existent. But any laws, just because I am using internet, it should not deprive any victim of my abuse of her legal rights. But that somehow seems to be a problem. For example, if somebody files a case against somebody calling him corrupt or a thief on Twitter, the moment there is movement in that case, all the TV channels go berserk, right? But, I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist for a long time. I've had defamation cases filed against me. I've dealt with criminal defamation and criminal contempt. I've gone to courts and taken bail in several criminal libel cases. So law that applies to me should also apply to somebody who is on internet, and if he's hiding or she's hiding behind anonymity, it's very easy to crack it.
Right. Sometimes service providers are also told you have to control this, you have to do something about this, get all of this stuff out. Is it possible to monitor what people are posting on the internet?
I think so. So what happens today is, number one, when there is, let's call it content that either should be is
something that
violates local law. Yeah. Also, I think that's a great example, right? So where when that content is flagged, so what the internet really is about, user-generated flagging. It could be flagged by governments, flagged by states, flagged by police departments, etc., etc. If the content violates local law, it is taken down. There is no debate about that. I know there's been some confusion around whether the internet platforms take down content. If the content violates local law, or if we get a court order, we take it down immediately. Now, where the debate always then arises is around when it does not, and who's interpreting it, right? So what we do in that case is, all the internet platforms, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Facebook, etc., we rigorously evaluate the content. If the content violates the terms of service, we take it down, and then if we believe, for instance, right, it's going to lead to violence, then we actually take it down. So I think that's...
How do you know? No, but it has to be self-regulated. It has to be the service provider.
How do you know everything? So, okay.
No, look, if there are prescribed laws in the country.
In the business of publishing in India, I am the most hands-off editor. I have never cleared the front page or opinion pages of my newspaper. But if something goes wrong tomorrow, if the junior most person does something wrong in the paper tomorrow, I am primarily legally liable. The court summons me, the cops catch me. So publisher, printer and editor in every medium in India is liable. Okay. So the same should apply to service provider on internet.
It should be the service provider.
Hang on a second. This is very important, right?
And it will.
No, hang on. I cannot, as a citizen of India, come up with a show that you're going to broadcast. The person who creates the content works for your company. YouTube is a platform, right? There's actually a very fundamental difference between a TV broadcast network and YouTube. YouTube and Facebook are platforms. The content that's generated is generated by 1 billion consumers around the world. So we're not saying, by the way, that technology platforms should be liable. What we're saying is there is a process that you need to go through. Right? Because at the end of the day, the content that you're broadcasting is developed by your people.
Yeah, but you're the platform. But you're the platform.
But it comes out through an editorial sieve. I take responsibility for it. Just because you've got a new kind of medium, I don't care. Millions of people create it. If you have a problem, you come back to me.
No, but we have never said we don't care. We said there is a process that...
No, so are you suggesting you'll never go to jail? Simply put. But I'm pushing. Are you suggesting in the case of libel you'll never go to jail?
I'm pushing. Many of my counterparts around the world have gone to jail. And there is the Indian government that would love to get me in jail. So let's be very clear. Let's be very clear. There's no question about that.
I'm pushing the envelope. I'm pushing the envelope. You have a medium as much as many of us have a medium, right? You cannot hide behind the fact that on my medium I don't edit. Everybody just files. Can I create 2 pages in my paper on its internet edition, if not in the main paper? But I said these are citizens' pages. Anybody? I go to jail even for a letter to the editor. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine in Pakistan who owns newspaper, the Frontier Post, his paper published a letter to the editor, which was considered blasphemous. He was given a death sentence. 12 or 13 years spent in jail, is now got out, but he was given a death sentence for a letter to the editor. So
But it says a lot about Pakistan.
I'm not saying they should visit any of us, but
Can I just come quickly back to the audience and get some words? Nalini Singh has something to say.
This is really to Rajan. You said there are about 200 million users of the internet. Do you have any idea about what proportion of these would be women? And paradoxically, Omar Abdullah might know this, that in the recent elections, women seem to have outnumbered male voters. So is the female mind at the moment, the voting mind, being driven by something quite other than internet? Do you think that if the number of women is much less, and I think it is, then are they really outside, and are they in a democracy bubble of their own?
Yeah, so I think I can't answer the second part of your question, but I'll tell you the numbers. There are 200 million Indians, 60 million of them are women. So actually India, interestingly, has the lowest percentage of women, among the lowest percentages of women in the world of any country. In fact, there are many countries in Africa and the Middle East that have higher percentages of women. So you're right in that the percentage of women
using the net.
No, on the internet. Of the 200 million, only 60 million. So 30% of internet users in India are women, compared to Egypt at 42%, etc.
Nenad, you are unfortunately in a minority on this panel, so I'm going to get you to speak on this issue as well. Does the internet help in sorting out gender issues and other such issues? I mean, certainly in the last 1 year, a lot of the movements that we've been seeing on issues like the gang rape and sexual harassment and the like have partly been amplified by social media and by the internet. Do you think eventually the internet will help in gender issues or not?
Well, it must, and particularly if you begin to look into societies where women are not emancipated, as in it's not the urban women, it's women who are more home, women who are more constrained and educated enough to access a fabulous way of connecting with the world and beginning to find themselves. So it's, I think, even more pertinent for our tier 2, tier 3 cities, and as education and schooling levels begin to deliver up girls and women who it really opens up the world to. And then if you begin to look at the education you can impart through internet, so it's not just about democracy and opinions and elections which happen, once in 4 years or whatever. It's about every day and the way you lead your lives. I think it's a fabulous tool. And in fact, I would say maybe something that the government should address. You really want to go and make sure your girls and women are internet savvy for their own sake, so that they can actually embrace the world and the choices that they have for them.
A window into a world which is outside what you are used to. Omar, do you see, is that a good way also of looking at it? Because what the internet does do is, on that one device, the entire world and the entire universe is open to you. Now, places like the Kashmir Valley, which have traditionally been slightly closed and you have to cross the Banihal to get outside, does this help in opening up a wider world, in exposing people to a wider setting than something they're used to?
It certainly does. And with exposure to the wider world comes greater aspiration.
Yeah.
You will find that...
troubles.
Well, troubles, yes. It makes us... the pressure on us to deliver increases, obviously, because people are exposed to more and they want more, which I guess is not a bad thing.
Yeah, I have to correct a statement made on the side here that opening up the internet to women creates troubles.
No, not to women.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying that, when, there's a certain degree of comfort which relatively insular societies have. Now, you open up and other forces start intervening, and there is a natural turbulence. Some of it is for the good, but some of it can be very regressive. And that's inevitable. And I think that's an occupational hazard which the internet has to take into account.
Because being open to the internet, I'm going to start taking some questions from online, some more questions online. But before that, the gentleman there has been trying to ask a question for a while.
Hello, probably it's good morning. I'm Arunda Watch. I'm addressing the people on the stage, plus each and everyone on the floor.
Yeah.
Please give me a patient hearing. I was at the hotel and suddenly I saw you all people gathered together.
If you could just keep a short question, please.
Sir, just give me 3 minutes by the watch.
I'm afraid we have 3 minutes left in the whole program, so can you just quickly give us a one-line question?
I'm from Punjab. I am a farmer.
Yes.
Never been abroad. India is my only place. There were quite a few.
We really are short of time. If you just ask your question.
It is not a question. It's a suggestion. You people are all brainies. I need to just add to one and all brain a few things which can change climate, which can change will change technology. How we have suffered. If you don't want me to speak, I can sit down.
We'll just discuss it after this.
Vikram, I just want to make one point. We've been discussing the internet in the context of democracy. From a marketing point where we are seeing it really work is in SMEs and business promotion. We're seeing a lot more independent, women's groups which are selling stuff through the net. So I think that's one motion that's also taking place, which needs to be, we need to be cognizant of. Tourism is being greatly helped by the use of the net. And these are some of the good things that are happening, from a business perspective.
Okay, can I just ask, in addition to the political videos and inflammatory stuff which we were talking about right now, at a more personal level, we are now seeing cases of cyberbullying which are really destroying lives. We're seeing people who will take pictures of other people, in a party, for example, and post it out there. So let's not fool our, and then of course there's issues like porn and others which now kids are getting access to at a frightening level which didn't happen earlier, cyber stalking. So there's a lot of bad out there on the internet, which now increasingly people are going to have to worry about how to keep it out of their own homes. And more people are going to get exposed to this. So let me just get everyone's take on this. There's a lot of bad also on the internet. Omar, do you want to go from that? And then, let's go in reverse direction. Shekhar.
Look, basic principle is still the same. That what laws apply anywhere should apply to internet. Now, I'll go back to the example I made of people trying to use internet and somehow thinking that on internet you can break the law and out a rape victim's identity. In other media, in conventional media, you will not do it, not just because you're afraid of going to jail, but because you're afraid of being made to look so cheap. Your children will come and say, what kind of parents do such a cheap thing? So I think internet is a medium that is developing. Large populations are getting used to it. Say in a country like Egypt under Hosni Mubarak or Iran under under Com will respond to internet in a certain way. They will use internet in a certain way. Populations like India, which is inherently used to argument and democracy and disagreement, mutinies and anarchy, will respond to it in a different way. Yes, I see examples of cyberbullying. Most of us are too thick-skinned to be bothered by that. But if somebody goes on and on saying so-and-so deserves a bullet in his bald head, then police starts calling you and say, please start worrying about yourself. So it does put you off balance, and it is something that you do worry about. But I think that is something that you can live with. I think the larger problem is where it becomes intrusive, and that's where my old-fashioned objections say to sting journalism comes in, because sting journalism without prior disclosure should be a crime. If I am as a media organization, our code of ethics bars us from carrying out stings. But if you have to carry out a sting as a media organization, I have to give somebody prior information, prior disclosure that I am going to do this. So I cannot keep this information or this video with me and use it for blackmail. And what is my instrument of blackmail? It's internet. Because all that will happen is some video will appear somewhere on internet. And I just worry that at this point there are hundreds of people pretending to be journalists with lots of stings in their pockets. We had a sting journalist come to us for a job in a bag. And he said, you want to sting against a judge, I have it. You want to sting against an NGO activist, I have it. You want to sting against an editor, I have it. Because he already had all these things. And he had sold 3 to a TV news channel, not yours, to a TV news channel already. So these are things that worry you, because internet is a force multiplier for good people and virtuous causes. It can also be a force multiplier for a lot of trouble.
Let me get everyone else very quickly to comment on this, including another question. This is on the internet, so I'm taking questions from the net as I speak. To what extent can the internet help in making India a corruption-free zone? Stings may be this, but I wonder if there's something else. Then I'll come back this way.
No, but there's a lot of corruption in stings.
Absolutely. Not all those things are
Let's be careful.
Yeah. I think, really what no one can dispute the fact that there has to be some discipline around the internet. The issue here really is how do you execute? There's no point having a law which you can't execute on. So how do you execute on a law? And when you bring in a law, the danger is we always regulate for the lowest common denominator. If we regulate for what is wrong, and in the process wipe out what is good. So there's danger that we over-regulate to the point that we lose what is good.
Right, we're almost out of time, so wait to hear.
I don't think we should pay too much of credit to, oh, there's spawn, there's this, there's that. I seriously believe it's an issue of parenting, it's an issue of what you imbibe, what are the values you imbibe. And you're always going to have some people who are going to abuse.
Parenting, yes, but what people about kids need the internet, for example, to do homework increasingly, and then suddenly they're exposed to a lot of stuff which perhaps they shouldn't be. So it's making parenting also far more problematic.
Yeah, but you've got to be a responsible parent. You can't shirk your responsibilities thanks to the internet.
Any more than Google can.
Well, it's making a doctor's job much tougher because every patient is a Google doctor now.
Yeah.
Before a doctor writes a prescription,
what you're saying is all wrong.
I think it's very clear that the internet will have to be regulated. The question is who decides?
Regulated, how and by whom?
The question is how and by whom. That is the question. It will have to be regulated. Yeah. How it will be regulated and who will decide and who will regulate, that is the question that is.
Having thrown that little time bomb out here or that bomb out here, you please come up with some solutions. This is a summit for solutions.
This is not something. This is something that the debate. Societies which have 75% penetration already, they have not been able to come. They have not been able to come with a solution yet. United States has no solution to this problem yet, right? It's about 78% penetrated, right? The parts in Europe which are 85% penetrated, so they haven't been able to come up with a solution. So I'm not sure there's an instant solution, but as intellectuals, as policymakers, as thinkers, we have to put our minds to this problem. That's all.
Rajan, you no doubt have a solution.
No, clearly. What's happened, it's an evolving medium, right? We have 20%, not even 20% of Indians online. We'll have 50 and 60% over the next 3 or 4 years. So there are lots of things I think we're going to all collectively have to learn and shape. But, we've talked about lots of concerns we have about the internet, but I think Suhail pointed this out. It's very important for us to keep in mind the amazing things the internet could do for India, whether it's around education, healthcare, distribution of public services, and keep that in balance, right? Because we can all get carried away saying lots of people are doing bad things about the internet, but the reality is today, if you think about all the core issues we have as a country, be it education, healthcare, internet can be an enabler. It can't solve all these problems, but it can be an amazing enabler, and I think we need to keep that in mind and keep the balance.
Right. Education is actually an important point which we haven't touched on so far, but the ability to take quality education to the length and the breadth of the country and indirectly strengthen democracy, that is massive.
On balance, the good that has been done with the introduction of the internet far exceeds its evil.
Bad.
And in particular, the quality of life for most people, whether it's for businesses or whether it's for the individuals buying railway tickets, has improved as a result of the internet. No, may I just finish?
That is not the argument.
No, the point is, therefore, if you apply existing laws to a new medium, you are likely to stifle it, you're likely to kill it. Internet needs at least a greater degree of license than has been hitherto allowed for existing laws. And I think because it's a new challenge, you have to be able to confront it and cope with it in a new way. If the same sort of messages which you get as a form of rebuttal on Twitter to something which I have said was to appear in the print media, it would be completely unacceptable. But am I going to take that person, including particularly these days the representatives of the stage army of the good, which is in Delhi, their language is equally buying.
Okay. Final comment from you on this.
Well, I think you've touched on a number of issues to do with the internet. I mean, you talked about easy access to pornography. Yes, as a father of 2 young sons, it is something that is not far from one's mind. Is there an easy solution to this? No. I mean, I remember my own childhood. We didn't have the internet then, but there was pornography floating around boarding schools even at that time. How do you control it? I don't think you can. I'll stick my neck out and say I think the internet has gone too far now to be regulated. As much as my fellow panelists might believe that the internet will have to be, I don't think it can be. I don't think, unless you were to reverse things and become completely dictatorial like China, I don't think you can in any sort of reasonable manner regulate the internet. There is a lot of good that happens with the internet. You have to take the bad with the good. I take your point about cyberbullying and the abuse on Twitter. Look, nobody forces us to be there.
Right.
If I'm not comfortable with the kind of abuse I'm getting on Twitter, switch off, sign off.
A lot of people have.
I mean, take a Twitter break or a detox. Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. Nobody's twisted our arms and
Switch off and go online if you don't like it. Well, I'd like to thank the panel for what's been a really stimulating